Good morning, everybody. This is Darren Pierce with Sage. I hope you're having a great Wednesday. Thank you for joining in our presentation today. We're going to be looking at the 4 reasons why you need estimating buyout. It is a new solution that, well, I say new, but it was released probably about 6-7 months ago for our SQL estimating environment, and has made some great progress along the way, and we're looking at taking a walk through what the solution can provide for your company. So let's go ahead and advance this. First of all, there are always some housekeeping rules that are involved with our presentations. We like to keep you mute along the entire presentation path, just so we get a good, clean, crisp recording. But if you do have any questions along the way, there is a questions section that you can enter those questions, and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. And last but not least, for the best visual experience, of course, expand the screen to take up your whole monitor so you can see what I'm doing and where I'm going the entire time. Now, we look at 4 reasons, and I've limited to 4 reasons, but there's plenty of reasons of looking at the buyout solution and what it can provide for your company. And first and foremost, it's more of a formalized process for you. And looking at that, most companies that I work with, we're using a combination of Excel, of Word documents, of email. Well, we're going to bring all of that into one package for you and make it very easy for you to work with. The other thing is when you look at the estimating integration, well, typically companies working with our estimating solution have the capability to take that information and import it into the buyout application, as you'd expect. So rather than going through and manually moving data around, which poses a risk and also takes a tremendous amount of time to do, we're going to give you the opportunity to do that with the click of a button. And we're going to be storing all your vendor prices in a database, separate from the database that exists in the estimating application. So just expands that functionality of collecting that pricing and that information. And last but not least, and this could be an integration point again, but I do like to separate it out. If you're working with our accounting system, Sage 100, Sage 300, we're going to give you the capability to generate the commitment details with just the click of a button. So along the way, we're creating a seamless integration that will provide you an opportunity to save a tremendous amount of time and also minimize that risk of double entry. So to look at it more of a visual experience before we jump into the application, what you're looking at, of course, is the Sage estimating. To begin with, starts the process. We've created the estimate, and at any given time, whether we've been awarded the job or if we're buying out the job before we've been awarded it, we can send that detail, that information into the Sage Buyout application. And as you can see, once we get it there, what we're going to be doing is sending out requests for quotes, going through the process of doing some analysis on that pricing, side-by-side comparison of that pricing. And then once we're done, we're going to send the POs, the subcontracts, out to the vendor, supplier, subcontractor, whoever they may be. And as you can see, that's going to flow into our Sage 100 and Sage 300 applications. So kind of giving a visual experience or a look at that before we jump into the presentation. Well, now we're going to go ahead and jump into the application. So first thing that I always like to start with is, of course, the estimating application, because there's some things that you can do with the estimating solution that will allow you to automate the process along the way. First of all, if you get into a bill of materials and we take a look at the bill of materials, we can edit it so that we have a default sub or vendor. Well, that's going to have an impact for us downstream from here. And every time I take off an item that falls into this material class, it will automatically align them on our spreadsheet. So you can see unified concrete right there. You can also see up here, we've got a subcontractor that we're working with for those particular items as well. Now, the other thing you may want to take advantage of is how often do you get into a situation where for a project, your job, that you want to buy it out differently than where you estimated that job. So typically a lot of our customers work with the 16 and the 48 CSI structures. Well, but we may want to buy out the job by phase, by building, by area. So down here, I'll take you to our spreadsheet sequences, and you can see we've got this estimate broken out by area, and of course totaling it up that way as well. So we want to be able to take advantage of that as we flow downstream from the estimate. Well, let's open up the buyout application. Let's go through the process here, and let's call this presentation and say okay. So now what we'll look at is a few things, but before we do, the solution is very straightforward. The steps, the process, group items, select vendors, commit, review. At any time, we can review this information. We'll jump into that once we get going. Over here, we have the options of applying any default taxes. And when do we want to receive these quotes back by? Sometimes we have to put those dates out there to make sure we get them back by those specific dates that we want to receive those. But up here, we can jump in and we can import an estimate. By the way, when we're looking at the categories that we're buying out, if you go back as far as, well, let's say I do, 20 years with Sage and Timberline back in the day, we had an old product in the pervasive environment, buyout, that would allow you to buy out just material and subcontract. Well, we've expanded the feature, the functionality to include labor, equipment, and other. So all categories rather than just being pigeonholed into material and subcontract. So we're going to give you that opportunity. We're going to pull from the job. I've got this one right here that we were just looking at. And if you're looking at Sage 300, again, we integrate with Sage 300, Sage 100. We can pull up the job list that exists in here. I've got today's presentation in here, of course, but here's an entire list of those jobs. Oh, and actually I want to select this one, so we're good to go. By the way, that pulled that from the estimating as well. So it's already pulling in those details. If we are using 300, we also have the capability to map this to an extra. So that job within a job, the original contract, well, we've got that, but then the client wants a pool, they want an outbuilding, it's worthy of tracking on its own. We can align that, map that to that extra as well. So give you that opportunity. Well, with that being said, we'll import that. And now we've got that estimate import. We could go through this process multiple times to do as many estimates, jobs, as we need to get those volume discounts maybe. We'll get some volume discounts on materials, whatever it may be. So let's jump to the next step. Now here's where we're going to be looking at the organization of putting together those quote groupings of those items, those materials, and subcontractors as well. When we look at this list here, you can see yellow backing on some items, and then other items have a white backing to them. Well, what that gives is a great visual experience to tell which ones need our attention and which ones don't. The ones with the white backing, as I mentioned in the estimating portion of this, is automatically being grouped for you. It's taking it to the next step. We'll see what that automation looks like. And then of course, again, the yellow ones need our attention. We're going to have to assign them to quote groups as we go through. Let's take a look at filtering the information. We can combine items, of course, or what we can do is we can just see the unassigned items. That's all we need to really pay attention to during the process. So we want to go through that grouping. All we want to see are those unassigned. We can even show some details for those. There's always some underlying details that you may want to take advantage of in here, and WBS codes would be one of those. And then, of course, assign group one-time items. So if you have an item in here that you need to create from the application, you most definitely can do that. And last but not least, when we look at this, we can break it out by material, or we can break it out by subcontract, just like what we did right there. So fine-tuning the list to have a quick access to the items that need your attention. Unassigned only is typically what a lot of clients will do, just so you see that yellow background. Now let's take it a step further. Let's organize the information in a manner that makes sense to the individual buying it out. And the reason we look at this, by the way, this application is separate from the estimating. So if I have 10 uses of estimating, I don't need 10 uses of buyout. It is a concurrent licensing application, and it allows individuals within the organization that might not be in the estimating group. I've worked with tons of companies where it could be project managers are doing the buyout. It could be the back office doing the buyout as well. So this application sits by itself, but of course, as you can see, has that integration. So now let's look at this over here. How do we want that information to be broken out, resorted? Well, you've got location. Remember my areas right there. Well, as you go through this, it filters the detail of each folder. So it's doing a filtering as you go through the process right here. So we may want to look at location. You may want to look at a bill of materials. You may want to look at uniformat. So we're going to give you the versatility, the flexibility to sort this and put any of these columns up there. There's tons of columns behind here that represent more information that we can take advantage of. But let's go back here. Let's drop down into our woods and plastics, and let's call this framers or framing. Let's say framing, right? Makes sense. And I'm going to copy that, fill down, say okay. So we've just organized that set of items into its own scope or quote group, right? So with that process being done, now we can go to the next step. One thing that you'll notice as we go through the process here is our toolbar will change. It will be only those applicable items to the step or the part of the process that we're in. You'll notice over here we have our material quotes or subcontract quotes. We could, of course, again, those other categories, equipment, other, labor, could be over here as well. So let's attack this framing one. Down here are all of the items listed for us. Up here is a blank canvas. Let's go ahead and involve some vendors in the process. Now we are taking advantage of the address book within estimating. So with that being said, and most of you may be used to the address book, again, Sage 100, you've got your contact list. We're going to be able to see those contacts in here as well. Well, we'll be able to see the contacts in a later portion of this. Again, this is our estimating address book that we're working with. So with that being said, framing, I can get right down to that group, or if I want to do a search, we'll go with AAA. Well, they're of course not going to be doing our framing. They're our insurance company, but two search mechanisms that you can really take advantage of to get right to the grouping that you want. Let's select both of them and say okay. So now what we've done is we've set up, they're ready to receive the request for quote. Down here, we've got them side by side. So you really get into the detailed analytics if you want, and be able to side by side check the scope of what they're going to be doing for us and the pricing they're providing for us as well. Well, of course, the next step is to give you the opportunity to send out those requests for quotes. Now, in today's environment, fax is not as predominant as it used to be. I've been around for 20 years, like I said, so back in my starting days, we faxed a lot of stuff, but now we've got the email integration as you would expect. And with that, we've got lined up the vendors, suppliers that we're going to be sending out requests for quotes for. For presentation purposes, I'm just going to remain with the two that are selected in here, but we could select all of them if we wanted to. So in this case, this is not limited to do 1, 2, 5. You could do 100, right? So, but in this case right here, for presentation purposes, we'll just send these to myself. As you can see, my email's right here. Now over here, we're going to have an Excel spreadsheet. This is very powerful because I'll show you what this will provide for us. And if I want to, I can, of course, put any plans in here within the limitations of email, right? I mean, if you have 10 megabytes, 15 megabytes, 20 megabytes, that gets a little bit skittish with emailing. But with this, we can send out that attachment, and it's going to bring up this pane right here telling us what we've done. And it's also going to date stamp this for us as well. Now let's take this a little bit further. What I'm going to do is act as if I am the vendor, supplier, receiving this request for a quote from, we'll call this Timberline Construction, right? So as I go into my email, I'm going to get in and I'm going to probably receive those here in just a moment. And there it is. So let's open up this one right here. So now we've received this email, and as you can see, request for quote is attached. We've got dates. You can, of course, work with this verbiage right here. Here is a PDF that represents that quote, but here is the Excel spreadsheet. So what we're doing is we're attaching an Excel spreadsheet with all of the details of that request for quote. So this is Northwest Subcontractor right here. We're good to go. So when they receive this, now imagine sending this to your material suppliers that you work with all the time. Here is a sampling of what we need pricing on for the next year. Send it over to me. So it doesn't have to be every project you get this, and I'll get into more of that. But for presentation purposes, I'll keep this pretty straightforward. I'm gonna type in 5 there and draw that down. Put any notes in here if we wanted to comment on this, and we're good to go. Now, of course, that's going to be pretty high. Again, of course, presentation. So when we look at this, I'm going to save this. Again, I'm acting as the subcontractor in this situation. So with that being said, I'm going to go to Buyout Demo. And let's go ahead and call this presentation. Quote. We're good to go. Now, of course, what would happen is they're going to send this back to us. And when we receive that, we could drag and drop it from the email if we wanted to. But in this scenario, what I've done, since it's all on my machine, I'm going to import that pricing. So if you go up to the toolbar here, we'll import the pricing. Now, keep in mind, this could be 20 of these Excel, 50 of these Excel spreadsheets that you're grabbing. But in this case, I'm going to say, okay, let's go out to our buyout demo, get that presentation quote, and then let's do something. Well, let's close this real quick. Let's go into here. I think it was actually here. It was our Northwest Subcontractor. Now let's import that pricing. So with that being said, now we hit the import pricing and it's going to bring in that pricing for us. Now, $104,000, I think that's going to put them out of contention, but here's the key to that is we want to get you away from having to manually enter this detail. And we're even going to take this a step further, which is going to have a web browser feel to it where subcontractors can enter their pricing in the web browser. That's in the future. But at this point, we want to eliminate as much as we can with that manual entry. Now, at this point right here, what we could do is we could store this pricing for future use. We can include items, so on and so forth. But a lot of flexibility, a lot of versatility that we can take advantage of right there. Now let's jump over into Unified Concrete and take a look at some other automation that we've put into the program. As we jump in here, what you can see is down here, I didn't do anything. I didn't organize this into a quote group. This all flowed from the estimating system. The other thing that I set up is if there is pricing available from some of our other vendors, suppliers, I want them to automatically be included in this process. So as you can see down here, we've got Unified Concrete 7,400, Morrison Concrete 81,000 and 24,000 for Columbia. With that being said, we're pulling in the pricing that they've given us. At any place, we can right click and we can go ahead and store that pricing if we need to. If we made changes to this, we want to store it for later on, we most definitely could. So that's part of that automation of streamlining the process, getting away from as much as we can from having you to enter in this detail. Now, if we jump over into our database here, we've got a full database of those subcontracts, those suppliers, and all of their pricing with a through date that we can take advantage of. Once it gets past that through date, of course, you'd expect, well, those prices wouldn't fill in automatically for us. So when you're looking at that, we've got all of this pricing from framers, all of these suppliers that we're working with here. So we're storing that for you to give you that opportunity to automate the process. So as I jump back over here, what's the next step? Well, with this vendor, we're going to select them, put a star by their name, and take the next step. Now, of course, you would be doing this with numerous quote sheets and quotes and going through the process. We're just going to keep to one as we look at the presentation. So now we've jumped over into the next step. And as you can see, our toolbar has been changed. One thing I will throw at you is that with this solution, we do take advantage of crystal reports. So if you wanted to drive change your request for quote form, you can do it. With crystal reports, it could look like anything you want it to be. Again, with POs, you could create those documents here as well. So you have that flexibility to do that. For most of our accounting companies, customers, I would suggest, for most of our accounting customers, I would suggest, of course, what you've got within your system. You've got the POs already built out, the commitments, the purchase orders and subcontracts already built. Why not use it there? Let's just drive the details over into the accounting system. So with that being said, I'm going to check this box right here. I'm going to say create the commitments. And now it's going to create that commitment for us. Again, this is just one at a time. You can have as many as you need in here. Well, again, we can create the documents here, or if we want to, we can jump over into job cost. I'll go into my commitments, and you can have these set up to auto commit if you'd like. There we go. And there we go. There's today's date, and this is the commitment, the details. So when you think about it, not only just a formalized solution that gives you the opportunity to do that comparative analysis of pricing, store all of the pricing for your suppliers and your vendors and subcontractors, it also gives you that integration point that's going to save a tremendous amount of time of double entering information and details. So with that being said, we're looking at those commitments, how it can flow through the rest of the process right there. Waiting for that invoice to come in from that vendor there. Now, last but not least, is at any point during the process, as I mentioned, we want to give you, well, I usually say a high-level look at this, but really it does jump down into the details if you look at categorically broken out for you. But most of us are going to look at the totals right here. Where are we as far as buying out this particular project? And how much do we have to go? How much is unassigned at this point? So on and so forth. So nice reporting within the system that you can look at, and it's always worth a visual. This bar right here does represent a percentage of the job that we look at as well being bought out. So nice to be able to look at this, refer to it, and say, well, we've got some other things that we need to do for this project along the way. Very simplistic product, very powerful, and very easy to work with and learn. So with that being said, those are the points that I wanted to cover for today's presentation. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and switch it back to Joni and let her take over from here. There may be questions.
Darren, great job. Thank you. I've been monitoring the chat box, and you've covered basically every question. So I think we're good, and we can wrap up. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Darren or Tony Mary, and we'll put up their contact information next. Thank everyone for joining. Thank you, Darren.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.